Good evening and welcome. The time is just after 6 p.m. and so I hereby call to order the October 9, 2023 meeting of the LBFinance Committee. Deputy Village Clerk Drew Irvin, will you please call the roll?
Member Fisher?
Here.
Member Rappin?
Here.
And Chair Rappin.
Here.
You have a quorum.
First item for our consideration is the September 27, 2023 meeting minutes. Are there any changes or questions?
No, ma'am.
All right, hearing none, is there a motion to approve? So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And no one's opposed. Hearing none, the minutes are approved. And the next item on the agenda is for the non-agenda items and visitors, and the Finance Committee allocates 15 minutes at this time for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the committee on any matter not listed on the agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to address us in person or through Zoom?
No, ma'am.
Hearing none, let's move on. Our next item of business is item number 4, a discussion regarding the draft fiscal year 2023 annual comprehensive financial report and auditor communications to the board. The annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year ending April 30, 2023, which includes a statement regarding the financial position of the village, the auditor's communication to the board, and the management letter were delivered to the village on Wednesday, October 4th. I'm pleased to report to the village, once again, we obtained the highest opinion possible, an unmodified opinion from the independent audit firm, Sikich LLP. Martha Trotter, partner at Sikich, is here tonight participating via Zoom to share their process, the results of the audit, what we should expect with regards to future GASB rulings, and to answer any questions. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Martha.
Thank you. Before I begin, would it be helpful if I share my screen?
You may.
All right. Thank you for having me on tonight. I will be presenting runs from pages LBNA 1 through LBNA 11 and is prepared by the village's finance department. If you read nothing else in the financial statements, I do highly recommend reading the LBNA, as this provides an executive summary of the financial statements and provides some additional context to the balances that are reported in the basic financial statements. It includes some comparative analysis, some graphical information and charts that will assist in your review and understanding of the balances.
I did have a question, I think that's contained in that, that analysis that you're referencing, if I've gotten my page numbers right. But it's going to take me a minute to find it. It has to do with one of the charts. Perhaps you could look at the charts there. It's in that report. I think that's the one. One moment, I need to catch up so I can see. That is a good question.
Page 3 of the MD&A.
Okay.
Is that Exhibit A?
Exhibit A?
Yeah.
Yes, I have that up.
Okay. Could you, I think later in the document, you referenced deferred outflows and deferred inflows. And so maybe that's more fully explained later. But I just wanted to point out that they've changed in some what appears to be a material manner between 2022 and 2023. 3.6 in 2022 deferred outflows, and now we're up to 4.7. And then deferred inflows have gone the other way. And just as you look at that, is that anything that we should be focused on? Is it ho-hum? Not particularly concerning or interesting to you?
That's a really great question. So deferred outflows and deferred inflows, as presented in this chart, it comes from the statement of net position, which is presented for governmental activities and business type activities. So for all governmental funds of the village and for the village's enterprise fund or water fund. What's included in these balances are the long-term assets and liabilities, as the statement of net position is presented on a full accrual basis of accounting. And a large part of the deferred outflows and deferred inflows that are presented here are obtained from the calculation of the actuaries for the net pension liabilities for IMRF and the police pension fund, as well as the deferred outflows and inflows associated with the OPEB plan. So those are all based on actuarial calculations.
So are you saying those, I'm sorry, are you saying those numbers are in deferred outflows or in long-term liabilities?
For both.
They're both?
Yes, the actuarial valuations calculate both deferred outflows and deferred inflows associated with the pension plans. Essentially what deferred outflows and inflows are a timing difference. So items that will become assets in the future or become liabilities or be paid off in the future. So there's a timing difference that's calculated largely based on actuarial assumptions that drive a big portion of these balances, and the fluctuation in large part is due to the requirements of GASB 68 to present a portion of the deferred outflows and inflows netted against either one or the other. So that tends to fluctuate from year to year depending on where the netting occurs.
So,
In terms of if it
oh,
should
go ahead.
be triggered, it's pretty common to see fluctuations between these amounts. One might go up, the other go down, or just depending on how GASB 68 was applied. So that is a large part of the reason for those fluctuations between those balances.
and this doesn't reflect a longer trend, that if I looked back more years, I'd see the numbers going this way, rather you think that these fluctuate rather than are steadily going one direction or the other?
Correct, exactly. They do tend to fluctuate.
And Martha, this
And
is,
I can point out what makes up those balances when I get to, I can pull up the statement.
I think I know where that is, yeah, I saw it later.
Martha, could some of the fluctuation this year have to do with that there was a full OPEB valuation and in the years prior it was a rollover? So this was a year that we actually did a whole valuation for OPEB, other post-employment benefits.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Bettina's asking is the,
Could some of the fluctuation have to do that we performed a full valuation for OPEB this year and it wasn't a rollover?
Oh, I see. It's largely due to the net pension liabilities for IMRF
Okay.
and its pension, so those valuations are completed annually.
Okay.
There's also a section in the footnotes where you can see how the deferred outflows and inflows are calculated for the two pension plans. That can kind of explain a little bit more the fluctuation from year to year. So I can point that out as well.
Chair Ryder, does that answer your question? She
As
said,
well as.
yeah, I think the answer
As
was
well.
relatively ho-hum. This is not concerning to you, Martha, correct?
Correct. It's pretty common to see these fluctuate
Yeah.
between the two categories.
Thanks, I think that was the only question.
And the net pension liabilities and those associated balances are pretty significant, so the changes there drive in large part how large these balances appear.
I may have interrupted you in the middle of your description of the MD&A. Hopefully I didn't, but you can just continue.
Can-
Continue with your presentation of the MD&A and describing the highlights of that, noteworthy items.
Oh, sure. So Roadplay does the MD&A as an executive summary of the report, and as you can see, provides some comparative analysis, so you can see how balances compare to the previous fiscal year, which is not part of the basic financial statements information. So this is a great section to focus on and to assist in providing some additional context to the balances and to see how things have changed from the prior year. And then following the MD&A
Can I interrupt you again when you're finished with this?
Sure.
Sorry, it's hard to interrupt you without being rude.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, on this page, when we reflect the cost of public safety, for example, of $5.5 million, does that include only that which we contributed, or does it include that which we've incurred? Each year, we incur more and more pension liability, and we contribute what the actuarial guidelines recommend that we do. So even we're continuing to accrue additional liability, but we don't put dollars to them. So I take it that the dollars, we don't fully pay the pension debt that we need to ultimately pay. But this 5.5 is actual dollars we put toward public safety, for example.
Correct.
Today's dollars.
Here, yes, that's the actual expenditures for the fiscal year. So those include the contributions that were made during the fiscal year to the pension fund, as well as any other public safety related charges. So your any public safety related personnel and benefit payments that were made during the fiscal year, as well as any other expenditures associated with public safety.
I point this out just because of the deferred nature of the liability we're incurring every year, right? Even though we're not putting money toward it, we are incurring responsibility for future payments. And so what this reflects is how much cash we put toward that
Correct.
requirement or that responsibility, not what we've actually incurred in that given year necessarily. Those two numbers are not necessarily the same. The amount we put out in cash every year is not necessarily the same as that which we have spent in terms, when you think of it in terms of what the future liability for our pension costs is. It just dovetails with the conversation yesterday. This is cash outflow or last week.
This is cash. Those are expenditures related to the public safety function that were made during the fiscal year.
Mhm.
The entire 5.5 million is not related to contributions to the pension fund for the funding of the liability. That a portion of that is related to the contributions that were made, so that there's more information in the required supplementary information where you can see what the village's actual contribution made to the pension fund was during the fiscal year. And there is additional schedules in the financial statements that break down what makes up the balance of the public safety, the 5.5 million that you pointed out there as well.
Mhm. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so following the governmental fund financial statements, in the basic financial statements, the proprietary fund or the water fund financial statements are pages 13 through 16 is where you'll find that information. This is the proprietary fund accounting is presented on a full accrual basis of accounting.
question about the report, but first of all, I'm so always grateful for the work you do for the village, and, pleased with our high ratings. In your letter, in the sickage letter, you did point out some deficiencies, made sure to categorize them as opportunities for strengthening internal controls and operating efficiency, and I was hoping you could just maybe recap that so we can have our eyes on the future.
Let me just repeat that to make sure I understood the question correctly. So, outside of the annual comprehensive financial report, are you referring to the board communication and the deficiencies that are listed?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, sure. So yes, we did, for the fiscal year ended April 30th, 2023, there was one deficiency that we came across that we communicated in the auditor's communication to the village board, and that related specifically to the roll forward of balances from year to year. So what we noted during our testing is that fund balances and that position in a few of the funds, not in all of the funds, but in 3 of the funds, did not roll properly from the previous fiscal year. And that was just a result of not all of the audit adjustments from the previous fiscal year being reported to the village's system. So when the system closed, there was a discrepancy between what the audited balances showed and what the village's system maintained. So it's a pretty simple, straightforward fix. It would just require that the village ensure that once the audit is completed, now all the trial balances are finalized, to ensure that the village's system is reconciled to the audited financial statements and all audit adjustments are posted. So when the year-end close is completed, those fund balances and net position balances should roll without any.
And then as far as the Government and Accounting Standards Board's, the pronouncements that you make comments to, anything, noteworthy to discuss with us? I read through them, some of them were hard for me to understand because
Yes.
yeah.
There are 2 pronouncements that are applicable to the current fiscal year underway, the fiscal year that will be ending April 30th, 2024. And these are listed here in the other comments section of this report, just to highlight what these relate to. GASB 94 and GASB 96, and they are related standards, and GASB 96 especially, subscription-based information technology arrangements, is largely related to the lease implementation that occurred for FY23. So it's a requirement to review all existing contracts the village has with subscription-based services or IT arrangements where the village does not own the software, but rather pays for the right to use software. So any subscription-based software arrangements, there are certain thresholds that are applied and requirements to determine what falls under any long-term items associated with that will be required to be reported under GASB 96. We call those SPIDAs. And GASB 94 is similarly related. It's for any arrangements with public or private partnerships the village may have where there's some payment being collected by the village for the use of for operating activities. So that one likely is not going to apply to the village, but we believe GASB 96 will have a pretty significant impact for most of our municipal clients, just based on the number of IT agreements that are now moving towards the cloud or more towards a subscription-based model of application.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Is that the end?
I think so, yeah, she's in the questions part, if there are any questions.
No, I mean, I am happy to add comments, but I don't have any questions.
Are we allowed to ask questions if we're not on the finance committee?
So we'll start with Finance Committee and move.
Great. I don't have any questions, just some comments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you like to make those comments now?
Sure. My comment is, would be, thank you, of course, for the work here. It's been a number of years now that I've been sitting and watching this, and each of the years our financial position in Lake Bluff is very strong. I mean, our revenues are terrific. Our sales tax, we're crossing our fingers and knocking on wood that continues. Our expenses are up a little bit, but controlled, right? I think there were some reasons for inflation and some reasons for our expenses to be up. Our funds are in great shape across the board, and our general fund is at 97% of annual expenses. Our target is 50. So from my standpoint, certainly the police pension is something to keep an eye on. There is no action at this point. The recommendation is if we don't take action, we continue funding at the levels we do. I think more the question is with the overage that we have at this time, what are the priorities for this board? We have a lot of liabilities out there. We've got a lot of infrastructure. We have a lot of things that this village wants to do. So in this time in which there is a surplus, the question is how do we utilize that in a way that's best for our village? But I see this as a very strong financial report.
And I'll comment that I agree with most of that. I just want to point out that the pension issue is not strong. It's going the wrong direction, has been down in funding level over the last 10 years, if not decreased from 58 to 52. So, hate to rain on that, but I think we have some significant concerns there. I do think that the recommendation likely is that we take this overage and put it toward towards some of the capital projects that we might not have been able to fund. And I understand that may well be the recommendation, but I continue to be quite concerned about the pension liability and whether we're leaving that to the next generation. I'll make one other comment. Oh, Taryn, have you made an...
I'm pleased with my comments.
Yes. And I'll continue to be the Debbie Downer over here. Okay, so...
Chair Ryder, can I add something to that?
Yes, please.
Tina and I talked about the police pension fund in light of this report and following on the heels of the last week and a half ago's finance committee meeting, talking about the actuarial compensation and the idea of the actuary continues to say, don't overfund, right?
We're not in danger of that.
Well, but we're also not underfunding. Right? We're continuing to make our payments. We're continuing to make, so according to the formula as prescribed to us. Now, the idea, we talked about if the village did have excess funds, into, ran a pot, some pot of gold into the rainbow, great. But I think the only way, and maybe you can say this better than I can, Bettina, but the way where you can have meaningful progress in the police pension fund is to have a continuous overinvestment, like to the scale or time of a decade. And the idea of, does the village have that much discretionary monies to commit to that type of investment? That's the difficulty, and to start and stop that without a clear plan, also knowing that you're not going to detract from all the other investments. I think of the stormwater committee, the stormwater utility creation and the analysis and the slide that we showed multiple times showing that we have all these required minimum level investments in all this infrastructure, and difficult as that is. It's just one of those things where it's difficult, there's trade-offs, right?
There are trade-offs, and we may indeed choose to make the same trade-offs we have been making. I just want us to do that with our eyes open, rather than say that this is something that we can deal with in 2040, because we think that the law is going to change, perhaps change, and the piper won't need to be paid necessarily statutorily in 2020 or 2040. But I do want to understand if we're really an outlier for the rest of the pension plans like ours. I understand we're an outlier in terms of size. A very small population, 15 annuitants, I think. That's going to make us more at risk. More at risk of being way off in our numbers.
Small
Because we don't
census,
have,
yeah.
we don't have large numbers to average the
Smooth it out,
mortality
yeah.
rates. So,
Chair Ryder.
yes, please.
Thank you. I would support your concern. I mean, our last 2 weeks ago, our meeting, your meeting showed that the calculation showed a certain number, but yet that number hasn't been met for 10 years. So I think there is a concern to raise investment in that fund by a couple percentage points, I believe. And if we have extra funds, it is our responsibility to our staff, our police department, to make sure that we won't have an issue in the year 2040.
Two comments I'll make, and I sound like a broken record on this, but when we say we spend 5.5 million on public safety, we're not, just because I put $100,000 toward a house, if the house is actually costing me $2 million or $200,000. Yes, I've only spent $100,000 this year, but I've incurred the cost of $200,000. We're not seeing the full cost of our public safety when we look at the amount we're spending today in terms of dollars out. Did that make sense? The other thing that made clear to me last week, 10 days ago, when we had our last meeting, was something that I hadn't thought about before, and that is we are estimating 7%. Best case scenario, we're estimating 7% on half of what we need. So that's 3.5%, even before you get started, because we only have 10 million, I know I'm off by several million, but 10 million invested, at which even best case scenario, we earn 7%. It's only 3.5% of the $20 million liability we have. So that really came home to me 12 days ago when we met. And so I want to fix the streets too. I just don't want us to sit here and say we're in great financial position when we have this looming liability that my children are going to pay.
So when is our next conversation for pension liabilities? In light of this report that is growing for us.
So as requested, I reached out to the actuary and they're working on scenarios that should be available for the next October meeting that we can review and discuss.
Thank you.
So I'm done with my broken record on pension liabilities. But just because you put cash into
Till 2
something
weeks.
doesn't mean the cost. But yeah, I'm done for today, done for this week. And I did want to point out that we've deferred capital projects, we paid less for capital projects than we might have, and we had higher revenue, higher sales tax, and higher building permits this year, which contributes to this strong financial position, which, when you look at it glass half full, we really have. We'll be looking at these other issues, and we'll be able to decide what to do with that excess of 97%, and our funding policy calls for 50% excess in our general fund. So we'll be looking at that coming up. Okay. You had a comment. Kat, I didn't want
Well, it's
to.
okay. I just had a question. I know you kind of, can she hear me?
Yeah,
This
she-
is
you
for
got it
Martha.
right there, Yeah.
Martha, I'm sorry, I know you spoke about the IMRF, it's basically kind of Susan's issue on page 47, the deferred outflow of resources versus the deferred inflow of resources on the IMRF. Can you just explain why the deferred outflows are so much higher and how we're supposed to keep up with that?
So deferred outflows of resources are actually calculated toward, so they're increasing the net position of the village. Their assets, they're reported with assets.
Okay,
That's
so-
not-
Sure, but so I guess my question is the net difference between the projected and actual earnings on the pension plan is a lot. So can you just explain to me, because I don't understand the table, what that means?
Sure, I'll try to explain it in, as best as I can. So if you look at that balance, 1.2 million, the net difference between projected and the actual earnings, that's calculated by the actuary
Any other comments or questions? Okay, with that, is there a motion to recommend that the village board accept the audit?
Before you do the call motion, I would like to again congratulate Bettina and her staff and herself Drew for reaching the highest opinion possible as an unmodified opinion. And as Martha says, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of dedication, and on top of what you do every day, collecting the data for Martha to give that opinion is daunting because I've seen that in other environments. So congratulations. Thank you very much for your guys.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the audit.
A second.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion is approved. Audit is recommended for acceptance. Thank you.
Thanks, Martha.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Two.
And next, we have a discussion regarding the 2023 property tax levy estimates. The village is statutorily required to estimate the funds to be raised from taxes on real property in the village prior to the adoption of the levy no less than 20 days before the adoption of the levy ordinance. This is an estimate and does not limit the board's ability to levy a different amount. Provided, only one, it is in compliance with the truth in taxation law and all applicable notice and hearing provisions. According to the Illinois DOR, the consumer price index, cost of living, or inflation percentage to use in computing the 2023 extensions taxes payable in 2024 under PTEL is 5%. Historically, the Finance Committee has used the maximum CPI figure for the levy estimate. The attached packet includes supporting schedules estimating the 2023 property tax maximum levy under the Property Tax Limitation Act with A, alternative 1, increasing the levy based on the new construction added to the tax rolls, EAV, with CPI. This is the approach typically taken for the estimate to maximize the village's flexibility. We can always go down from here. B, alternative 2, a 3% factor increase. C, alternative 3, a calculation without a CPI factor. And 4, a freeze without any changes to EAV or CPI factor. Also included is a chart summarizing the net revenue changes for levy calculations ranging from 0 to 5% at 0.5% increments to demonstrate the net changes, assuming a change to the library levy and also a maximum PTEL library levy. In light of the conversation that we've had last meeting and again today, broken record, with the police pension fund actuary, we need to acknowledge that taking less than the CPI will require a reduction in revenues to the general fund. Again, this is only the estimate, and we have 2 other opportunities to discuss the levy at the Finance Committee if desired. Is there a motion to recommend that the village board estimate the levy at the CPI level?
I would make that motion.
And I will second it.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the recommendation will be delivered to the board. Thank you. Okay. Did we have any other comments or questions regarding any of the items before we adjourn?
To your question earlier about how we measure up to other communities, maybe similar situated, and just geography, we'll get some survey data from other communities so you have that as part of your conversation with the continued conversation around the police pension fund.
That would be helpful to know. You know, not that we have to do what all the popular kids are doing, but it's helpful to know if we're in this alone come 2040.
Yeah. I mean, there's communities that can't even afford to make the minimum, the insurance required payment, let alone what the.
And the arbitrary date in the sky of 2040 is really rolling it out. You know, 2041, the liability doesn't go away.
Yeah.
It's just going to increase again.
Right.
So at some point, they have to roll it all forward, and it's really just a whole actuarial process, if you will, not necessarily a hard, tangible number.
They'll keep moving the
So
finish
just kind
line.
of keep that in
Yeah.
mind.
So, but
It doesn't go away.
how are you relative to the other, that's just worth another data point to have. And
I would like to know that. It doesn't necessarily dictate what we do.
And there's communities that are really close to 100%, and there's communities that are really at the other end too. So this is all over the board.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, thanks, I appreciate that data. And I know we talked about with the actuaries maybe looking at a 6%, for example, or 6.5 or 6.8%
She was looking to
expected
match the
return.
state. Yeah.
To match the state. That would, if we did that, as
You're
I
gonna have that
understand, that would change the actual aerial recommendation.
It would
Go-
increase
right.
the contribution, yeah.
Okay.
And make our position less attractive.
Yes,
Right.
and,
Yeah.
Right.
but at least we're not asking for us to do it based on the average of the last 10 years, because then it would be way less than 7%. It would be
Yeah.
more like, I don't know, 3 or something.
Yeah.
So, with that, a motion to adjourn. The time is now 6:54, and we need a motion to adjourn.
I will make that motion.
I will second it.
All in favor?